Hey, everybody. Happy Tuesday. So instead of having our normal prayer time, I wanted to air my interview with State Representative Melissa Shusterman. She was gracious enough to offer us an interview. And so I wanted for you guys to hear that before we move into the yellow phase. And so stay tuned. Hey everybody, you're seeing this Tuesday. We have recorded this on Friday morning, and I'm honored to have Representative Melissa Schusterman with me. I just wanted our congregation and our community and those that subscribe to our email and our Facebook page and our YouTube page to know who our leaders are. We're really big here in church on understanding who God has put in office, and we want to make sure that we give them time to speak and to so that you can meet them and they can meet you. And so hey, Melissa, thanks for doing this today. I'm really excited that you're with us.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It was a surprise email or a Facebook message. And I do think it's really important that I'm able to speak to your community during this pandemic and during this unusual time. So I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, I was shocked you guys responded so fast either, and so I was really happy about that. And kudos to Tyler for setting it all up. I'm really happy that happened. So for those of us so a lot of us in Phoenixville are not originally from Phoenixville. I know we have some people who have been here their whole life and they love it and they'll never move. I'm originally from New York City and I've only been here for 4 years and I love it. I mean, I'm so thankful that God moved my family here, and I know there's a lot of people. We see a lot of new apartments going up and all those things, and everyone moving in. And so some people may not know exactly what who our state representative is and what they do. So if you could tell a little bit about yourself and your family and how you got involved in politics and what district you represent.
Yes, I'm a fourth generation Phoenixville resident, but I did move away and worked in New York City and LA. I was a television and video director and producer. I also wrote some of the shows people might have watched. And then, unfortunately, I became a single parent who was also caretaking my grandparents right here in Phoenixville. And luckily did meet my current husband, Hans, about 7 years ago. And I think I ran for office to become a public servant, to serve. Some people serve others in a church. Some people serve in the military. This was my opportunity to really uh, elevate and make loud, I like to say, everyone's voice, not just the voices of the people who know how to stand next to legislative power. So I ran for office, and my district, first of all, I ran for office and I ran including anyone who wanted to work in on a campaign. So we had Democrats, Republicans, people who were independent, people who never thought about politics before. So it was a very dynamic race. And by the end, we ended up winning and swinging the district by about 12 points. So I am currently in office, and the 157th community or district, as they call it, includes Upper Providence in Montgomery County, Phoenixville Borough, Tredyffrin, and Schuylkill. That makes up about 67,000 people.
Wow, yeah. And Montgomery County being one of the epicenters of this virus, and so from day one you've been on it. And I was thinking about just some of the initiatives that you've been doing, and I follow I liked your Facebook page. I follow you constantly, and I pray for you all the time. And I know the decisions that you guys make are tough, but I've noticed that you focused a lot on small businesses. You focused a lot on food safety, um,
Yes.
especially with food deserts and making sure that no one is without. You focused a lot on the one that I saw recently that really touched me was what you're trying to do with long-term care, but to make sure
Yeah.
that people are getting not only reimbursed for the PPE, but also to make sure they have it. because we're noticing. I mean, the stats that are coming out now about like how nursing homes make up, I mean, either half or more of the people who've been getting this virus, and some nursing homes haven't gotten any, and some they make up the majority of the numbers in some of the counties of the people who have been getting sick. And then you have those workers who are there every day that are being inundated with an opportunity to catch the virus, and it's tough. And so I'm really appreciative that you're doing that. Somebody told me the other day that we don't care about seniors until they're gone. And for a church, we call them our elders call them every week, and they make up a lot of our church. You don't realize it until they're there, and they are your most faithful servants. They're the most faithful givers. They're the ones that are the most patriotic. And so like to lose a generation of people because of this is just very scary. So I'm very thankful that's become something to the forefront. And then mental health.
Can I mention, I want to reinforce what you are bringing up and let the community know my priorities.
Sure.
No, we did not anticipate a pandemic, but once one was here, some of my first priorities were making sure people's bellies are full. And that was really step one. Are people in a home? Are their bellies full? Can we make sure that food is getting to where it needs to go? And Phoenixville and Tredyffrin have done an amazing job supporting the community. And on the state level, I've often proposed legislation to make sure that we're supporting our food banks, that we're allowing our restaurants to donate the food they don't sell during the day at the end of the day without having recourse. Yeah. As well as another group which you mentioned is not only our seniors, and I'm on the aging committee in Harrisburg, but also people with intellectual and physical disabilities, with autism. One of the first things I did was go to our School of the Blind over in Tredyffrin and make sure they had enough masks to go into their small group homes. Taking coloring books to our senior homes, because people suddenly aren't able to interact and do those activities. We are working really, really hard to make sure our care workers are taken care of, that they have the pay they need, the access to public transportation. I have a piece of legislation that would give all care workers deeply discounted public transportation. I've been working on this for over a year. It's critical that we lift up our personal care workers, because they're the ones that make sure your seniors get to mass. They're the ones in service. They're the ones who really are those people's left and right hands in so many ways. So I really appreciate that you've been reading some of what I'm putting out there and realize that these are the communities that need the most help in so many ways.
It's sad that it takes a pandemic for us to highlight the people that should have been highlighted all the time. But I'm glad that it's happening. So we're able to, I think that deep discount's a great idea. They have to, a lot of them. So I drive Uber sometimes on the side, and 30% of the people sometimes that I'll have to take to Philly if I'm up for a trip or whatever comes from places like Phoenix House. The personal care workers and the healthcare workers, a lot of them are, driving or traveling hours on public transportation. If we could just make it a little easier, I mean, that would be, and living in New York, I know how much it costs, and so here it's a little cheaper, but still, man, that's
it's expensive. And, there's a resistance. People have political agendas. They're not willing to increase the minimum wage to 15, which I'm in support of. So I'm trying to find every other way I can put money in a care worker's pocket or a gig worker's pocket. Yeah. And you brought up gig workers. They're critical, and they aren't always recognized by unemployment. So I work very hard to make sure that either federally or statewide, they're being recognized and receiving unemployment, which did happen about 4 or 5 weeks ago. And that's what my staff works on. We have 5 people. They're working on unemployment, morning, noon, and night, and any other needs. And I want to make sure that you do provide your community with my email, with Tyler's email. Email's the best way to get a hold of us right now, but we also will have a phone number that we can hand out as well. It tends to fill up. But we are here to support people if they have a question about almost anything in regards to this state. So.
Yeah, great. Yep, and we'll put it right there. So when we put it in, so you'll see it. Um, so right now, there may not be one, but what is a typical day like when you're in Harrisburg now? I mean, with social distancing and going on the floor, like how does that work?
Well, a typical day in Harrisburg does look a lot different now. Before we had so many visitors, we have protests and rallies and press conferences. So a lot of that has been turned down or off. And so we do go to the floor. I happen to be a deputy whip. So
Mm,
I don't want to get in the weeds here with explaining this,
yeah.
but I'm the first freshman legislator ever assigned to this leadership position in the history of Pennsylvania,
Mm.
regardless of if the person was a Democrat or a Republican. So I'm extremely honored. And I have about 12 legislators all here in the Southeast. And we discuss the legislation, and then it's called you whip up the vote to figure out where people are voting. You're not asking them to vote a certain way, you're just whipping it up and finding out where people fall. So a typical day would be going on the floor. I wear a mask. Unfortunately, the people across the aisle
Oh, yeah,
sit next to each other and they don't wear masks,
yeah.
and they really don't represent my Republicans here in Phoenixville, Tredyffrin, Upper Providence, and Schuylkill. They're defiant, and unfortunately this week we found out that 2, possibly 5 legislators have tested positive, and now we're going to have to figure out if we've been in the same proximity to them.
Yeah, that's tough. Oh man. So where are your district offices? There, I know there's one right by Target and BJ's in Oaks. And where's the other office?
Okay, so there is a satellite office near BJ's in Oaks,
Mhm.
and it's an old mail post office.
Yeah.
So it's not the most comfortable office inside, believe it or not. So we take appointments only there, and then we're open maybe certain Wednesdays and Thursdays, depending on the time of year. Our office that's open full time is in Paoli.
Right.
It's right across from the train station. It's behind and it is accessible from, I wanted to make sure we had one office that was so someone who could be hired from Philadelphia and come in on
Right.
the train or bus.
That's awesome. So so right now are the offices open?
No.
No, okay.
I'm actually home right now, and our offices aren't open. We might be opening late in the yellow phase or mid in the yellow phase. And that brings me to talk a little bit more about the yellow phase. I know that was something that you were interested in knowing. Yellow phase, basically, the biggest difference, because now we do have outdoor dining for restaurants, is that you can't have gatherings over 25 people. So we're still practicing social distancing, wearing the masks. And then I think it's going to be a very quick jump to the green phase. So the yellow phase, and in preparation to the yellow phase, it allows businesses and churches to get ready. Uh, to provide that hand sanitizer, to work with their state representative if they don't have the face masks that they need. And then when we go to the green phase, we're basically opening, but we are a new normal.
Yeah. 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 In that yellow phase, when we're going to, I know that there's outside dining is going to be starting to happen. Inside dining will happen when we move to the green phase. That's, I think a lot of small businesses would fall under the category of food and service. I know there's some retail opportunities that are happening as well. So in our district, what has been what has been the hit of coronavirus when it comes to small businesses? I mean, I know it's been impactful, but do you have any numbers or just kind of an idea about like what it's meant to be closed for this long and then reopening?
Well, that's a great question. And I'm not sure I'm going to be able to give you the answer you're looking for. But my experience with working with small business, I ran my own small business for about 7 years, is I'm encouraging small businesses that are sole proprietorships to get back to work now.
Hmm.
And an example of that is, let's say you have a flower shop and you're able to even maybe buy flowers from BJ's and Wegmans and rework them and deliver them with zero contact. I'm encouraging businesses like that to get going now. We can't afford for you to lose any more revenue.
Right.
But at the other side of that, I'm working on a $50 million relief package statewide that gives small grants and loans to those businesses.
Right.
We also have Chester County giving small grants and loans. Now, do you notice we're 8 weeks into this pandemic and we're finally seeing movement with small businesses?
Yeah.
That happens because the larger businesses have an entire staff that can apply for these loans and grants. They have relationships with their banks. So my office is helping people with relationships with banks, finding those grants and loans, and getting back to work. I also have another piece of legislation that was just introduced about e-commerce, and it's encouraging small businesses to use this free program to learn how to move a portion of their business online. And it seems like you, as a church, have learned that prior to this pandemic. It was great timing.
Yeah, yeah. I serve on the board of an addiction recovery center in New Jersey, and what you were saying about like big businesses having a staff to look up these grants when the nonprofit stuff came out from the federal government, the paperwork. To fill it out. And not only that, only certain banks were doing it, and the larger nonprofit organizations had staff already working on that. So, thank God they got in and they got what they needed to get through because they're not going to be able to have summer camps, Bible conferences, or anything. And so this will help out. But yeah, just the idea of just because money is being offered, it doesn't mean they know how to get it. And so to be able to educate them and make it easy is phenomenal. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, we keep saying in my office, no question is too small.
Right.
No problem is too large. If we don't handle it, we'll connect you to our congresswoman if it's a federal issue. If it's a issue that's outside of the state, we will connect the community partners that can help. So really, there is no question. I'll give an example. There is a man who called. He's has a family of six. They were doing okay. They're waiting for their unemployment, both mother and father out of work. And when I spoke to him, I said, "Do you realize there's a program called TNE Cares in your community, and they can help write checks for your utility bills?"
Hmm.
And he goes, "Oh, no, no, no. There's other people more in need than me." And I said, "No, I need you to pick up the phone. If you don't, do I have permission to pick up the phone?"
Sure.
Because we really, there's help out there. Please, please let us help you get that help so you're not suddenly feeling overwhelmed.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's part of our taxes. It's what we do. So go for it. Yeah. So I know on Saturday there's a community food drive that's going on in Phoenixville. What can and I'll give you two questions in one. What can individuals do to help right now, and what can organizations like churches do to help right now?
That's a great question. I think it's as simple as dropping something off to a food drive. But if you're at risk, please don't. I was going to attend that food drive this Saturday, but I don't know if I've been exposed, so I'm waiting to hear if I sat in a committee meeting with one of these people who tested positive.
Yeah.
That is one way to help. There are I think helping is also being maybe involved with your values. there's a group called Power. It's a Christian oriented group that is trying to help move the legislature to equally funding every neighborhood and every public school.
Hmm.
So if you really think of what that means it shouldn't matter if you were born in North Philadelphia or Tredyffrin, the funding to the schools should be equal. And I believe wholeheartedly in that sentiment. And I've worked with the group called Power, and I could always connect you with Power once they, were through the pandemic. I also think checking in on one another. I know it's not organized, but we really need to find a way to check in, drop off a little gift, and a little gift could be as simple. Once again, I'm mentioning coloring books, something out of the ordinary, something that would help people keep their mind off of the news.
Yeah.
And I recommend for everyone to not watch the news too much.
Yeah.
You're welcome to come to my rep page because we talk more specifically about the county and the state. Sometimes when we're looking at the entire international and federal news, it can be overwhelming.
Sure.
Still important to be informed, but we also need to see other things and experience the joy. So musicals are always a nice way to enjoy television.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually signed up for something called the New Paper, which basically just gives you a text in the morning of the 5 biggest things you need to know, and then you can decide which one to click on. And so I had to do that from the very beginning. And that brings me into the last thing before I let you go is just the idea of mental health. And I wanted to tie that into a community like a church, because I feel like, and this is just in my opinion, I feel like if it was earlier stated the value of spirituality and mental health in that relationship, I feel like there would have been more of a push for churches to be considered essential. And I feel like for me, I feel that God tells me we're essential. And I know people's lives change, but we also want to be good citizens. And so if you read the Bible, the Apostle Paul never used his Roman citizenship to keep a church open. He only used it to get in front of Caesar to share what Jesus did for him. But then you have Americans, we fought for freedom from our British masters. And so just like the musical Hamilton says, freedom is a contradiction. It is, because we actually rebelled, and so somewhere in the middle of all that, there's this relationship between the church and the Commonwealth. And I feel like we would have been more prepared if there was like a statement like, yes, churches are essential. You have to do it differently, but it would be helpful. Because I remember early Governor, and Governor, I give him credit. He's been through so much. I mean, he just, and these press conferences are on the fly. First he's in a suit, then he's in a sweater at home because everything, it's a lot. And so I remember one of the people in the press asking him a question. This is about 2 weeks into the pandemic, and they were talking about churches meeting. And he was like, what? And so he said, his statement was, I know churches need to get together to collect the offering, but, and it was to me, hit me a little bit, because it was like, it's not about that. For some people it is, because they're smaller churches and, they may not, they may not survive during this. But I feel like if there was a statement saying that we were essential from the beginning, we could have done just like the grocery stores have done and had parameters set in place in order to perhaps, change the way we do things, but at least recognize that it's not that the Commonwealth is closing us down. It's that these are the guidelines that we follow to keep people safe. And we've done our best on our own to do that. But I just wanted to hear like your take on that, because I feel like churches have always been essential, even if, spirituality is essential, especially for people with mental health. If people choose not to believe in anything, there's a path for that with mental health. But statistically, we know that spirituality is it's a part of addiction recovery. It's a big thing. So I just want to hear your take on that.
Yeah, no, thank you, Pastor, for bringing that up. I think we entered uncharted territory.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Someone called me about sunbeds. Someone called me about doubles tennis, and I'm not equating them to a church or spirituality.
But
what I'm saying is I think the governor and Dr. Levine, Secretary of Health, did a great job of making sure we immediately had social distance.
Yeah.
So by doing that, some things were overlooked. My centers that sell flowers and plants were shut down, and I've never seen two women tackling each other over a plant or a bush. I think that can be done socially distance. Yet we're doing trout fishing where everyone's shoulder to shoulder fishing in a pond, whereas I imagine trout fishing in Valley Forge where you're socially distanced and such. So I think what happened is I don't think anyone was overlooked, but the urgency and the massiveness of what could happen. And you're speaking to your community, has a lot of seniors in that community, that in hindsight, possibly this was a good move,
Yeah.
possibly. And in hindsight, smaller churches like yours should be moving online so we don't lose that spiritual connection. Unfortunately, that gives you a lot more work. And but if we do that we have more programming that can move virtually, we are prepared if we have another issue that might not be a pandemic. It could be a flood. We just don't know what's ahead of us. So I don't think churches or mosques or synagogues or any religious organizations were intentionally separated or seen as non-essential. I think it was all about keeping people far away from one another. So now we're moving to yellow, and believe me, it's not a moment too soon. We're all going a little stir crazy,
Yeah.
and we'll be able to connect that way.
Yep. Great. Well, Ms. Schusterman, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to stop the recording, and I'll be back with you guys that are watching this pre-recorded. Man, that was a great interview. Thanks, Representative Shusterman, for taking time out to do that. And so on Thursday, we're going to hear from Mayor Pete Urschler from Phoenixville. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see